Okay, I have another thought on that viral video from Dr. Julia, who's the neuropsych, talking about anxiety and how it's tied to like our inability to accept unpredictability, to accept the unknown, right? Anxiety is a lot about wanting to control a future that is not yet written. And I made this whole long video about Timothy Snyder's book on freedom, especially his chapter on unpredictability, and how unpredictability, both accepting that the future is unpredictable and then us acting in unpredictable ways, that is a path toward freedom. That unpredictability is a key component in a free society and a key mindset in people who are fighting for freedom. And I was sitting with this for a minute as I'm editing the video, and I'm thinking, like, this really ties in with the concept of authoritarian parenting, and how in societies where we see really punitive authoritarian parenting, we are much more likely to see the rise of authoritarian governments. I think it's pinned at the top of my TikTok. I have a video about the authoritarian parent, which is a large body of research that came out after World War II, which sought to understand, how does fascism rise? What is the defining factor? And it turns out it's raising children with an authoritarian mindset. Now, to be clear here, I'm entirely biased against authoritarian parenting. We have 4 kids, 22, 21, 17, and 14, and we are non-authoritarian parents. I don't believe in obedience. I don't believe in coercion. I don't believe in punishment. I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash for that. I do every time I talk about it, but I'm happy to expound upon that subject more fully. I'm happy to answer any questions people have on what non-authoritarian parenting actually looks like when your kids are little, when your kids are going through adolescence, what it looks like when you have a relationship with your adult children that is non-authoritarian. Happy to talk about that. Never expected obedience out of my children. And that's so different than the mindset we have in evangelical America amongst Republicans. When you see a shift toward authoritarian parenting, which relies on coercion, obedience, punishment, retribution, you are raising entire generations of people that have been indoctrinated since childhood to believe that they must obey authority figures unquestioningly. Evangelical America, part of the big reason that I left the church was that I never could get on board with the parenting tactics that were being used around me. I thought that they were dehumanizing, violated children's bodily autonomy, and were just straight up not an embodiment of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I also saw that they didn't work. They produced shame. They produced children who sneak and cheat and lie. They break trust in the relationships between parent and child. I see authoritarian parenting as entirely anti-Christian, at least in terms of my understanding of the teachings of Jesus. But that's not how the evangelical church views it. They're very heavy-handed. There's a lot of emphasis on first-time, unquestioning obedience. It is a mark of a good, righteous parent. It is a judgment on you, either positive or negative, as a mother, as to whether or not your child unquestioningly submits immediately, with no back talk, with no negotiation, with no argumentation, right? If I ask my kid to do something, they can come back to me and be like, no, I don't want to do that. How about I do this instead? Or, you know what, I need 20 minutes. I'm right in the middle of a conversation here with my friends, or I want to finish up the chapter in my book first. Or they might be like, I don't actually think it's necessary for us to do this task at all. My kids are free to argue with me. They are free to question. That's how we help children become critical thinkers. It's how we help children advocate for themselves, for their values. It's how we help children protect themselves from being coerced and manipulated by people in power. I never expected unquestioning submission to authority, but that is something that is of high value in evangelical America. They will hit their kids with plumbing line. They will paddle the shit out of them. They will violate their children's bodily autonomy endlessly in order to break their will, to purge them of a rebellious and disobedient spirit. This shit is so common in evangelical America. Yeah. And then you have kids who are trained, right? They call it child training. To Train Up a Child is a child abuse manual by Michael and Debbie Pearl. And so many people that I was in homeschool groups with, that I went to church with, used this child abuse manual to break their children's will, to get their children to unquestioningly do whatever a parent or a pastor demanded immediately. The goal is to shape your children, abuse your children, coerce your children through pain, through fear, through threats, through intimidation. to mold your children into little beings who are entirely predictable. It is stripping away your child's natural unpredictability and authenticity. It is refusing to let your child shape their critical thinking, shape their personality in a way that is true to themselves, but instead to get them to be entirely predictable little automatons, is how Timothy Snyder expresses it, that can be wound up and made to act in ways that benefit those in power and not in ways that benefit the individual, in ways that are entirely unfree. When you raise entire generations of children with this mindset, you groom an entire society for authoritarianism. Part of the reason I speak so much about non-authoritarian parenting in 2025 is because it is a courageous act. It is an act of resistance. It is one of the ways that we have got to engage to help get ourselves out of this. One of the things Snyder talks about later on in his book, in the chapter on solidarity, is that we should have solidarity with youth who are rebelling. That rebellion is a really good and natural thing, and we should not discourage it. It's how youth connect with their authenticity. It's how they learn who they are. It's how they learn about their values and how to interact with their values in a way that's authentic to them, and not just some way that an adult told them how to be, how to behave, how to think. And also that rebellion is unpredictable. Children who are growing and learning and understanding the world on their own terms, not just through their parents, are going to engage in rebellious activity if they are living in an authoritarian society that demands obedience, right? When you're not an authoritarian parent, rebellion doesn't exist, because your only expectation is that you as a parent support your children in being their authentic selves. So there is no predictable set of expectations that children are rebelling against. They're just being who they are and learning how to interface with the world. So I think that Snyder is right. As long as we live in an authoritarian society, we should learn to embrace rebellion in our children. We should learn to accept it and encourage it, because it's helping children be authentic and be free in a society that wants them to be unfree. But in a world with non-authoritarian parenting, in a free society, rebellion just doesn't exist. It's just a normal part of development. I don't know. I think there's so much more here to this concept of unpredictability. I keep coming back to it. I keep chewing on it. Understanding that the future is not yet written. The future has not been predicted. We don't know what's going to happen, but we get to help shape what the future looks like. And then if we choose to act in ways that are entirely predictable, and as the fascists want, if we let them squeeze us into that tiny mold, if we let them turn us into little automatons, if we raise our children to be those automatons, we're doing the work of the fascists for them. And if instead we can be unpredictable, we can encourage our children to be innovative, adaptive, unpredictable, then gosh, we can shape a future that is so much more than what Project 2025 wants for us. We can shape a future of freedom. But I do really think it requires our whole society to learn how to parent differently, to parent with non-authoritarian, compassionate, humane parenting. Parenting that respects our children as individual, full human beings with bodily autonomy, with human rights, with their own will, their own true authentic selves, and that it's our job to help facilitate them being able to live authentically in the world. It's our job to help facilitate freedom for them so that they can be who they truly are. I just think this is such an important element of how we help get our society dug out from where we are now. It all always comes back to how we raise children, how we treat children, the most vulnerable, powerless segment of our society. What we do to them sets the stage. How we treat them sets the stage for what happens to us as a nation. So I think it's so important that we take the time, we turn our focus to how we are treating kids, what we are doing for kids, how we are raising our children, how we are making sure that they get to be their true, authentic selves. That no Project 2025 playbook is going to hem them in. No Project 2025 playbook is going to take away their freedom. The future doesn't belong to Project 2025. Our children don't belong to Project 2025. I truly believe the way out of this requires us to dig deep, to lean into our humanity, to remind them of our humanity, for us to remember theirs, and especially for us to remember the humanity of our children.